Welcome, Jets and Bombers fans all across the U.S. and Canada. You're now boarding the Winnipeg Terminal. I'm your host, Mike D'Andrea, along with Joe Pritchard. Joe, it's been a while. How we doing?
Uh, Ask me how I feel about going to 3 straight Grey Cups and seeing my team lose every time.
How do you feel about going to 3 straight Grey Cups and watching the Bombers lose?
It could be worse, I suppose. I could have been watching the Riders win.
Yeah, that it could be much worse, I suppose. And yeah, after a long hiatus where a lot has happened in the midst of our little hiatus too, for a number of reasons, which we'll get into later. But just to touch on what we're going for the season premiere, just want to talk about the dominant play that the Jets have put on. Of course, there's been some skids along the way, but that happens. We want to talk about our Vesna Buck again going. He wants to put his name on that trophy yet again this year, which it's very likely going to happen with the way that he's been playing, as well as a couple notes of Bombers news. Joe, if you just want to touch on that real quick, and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah, we sure can. In this episode of the Winnipeg Terminal.
So I got to preface the show with the fact that as well, all the listeners know as well as we do, that we tend to go off the rails. Now, as any podcast, you tend to have show notes. However, there is a caveat with this particular show. We are just flying by the seat of our pants, and maybe that's bad etiquette to announce that right off the bat that we don't have show notes, but there's just so much to talk about after we have had what was it now? Probably a 7-month hiatus.
Yeah,
Would you say
somewhere
maybe?
somewhere in that range. I feel like it was at the very bottom of the Bombers' tough start that we had, like the one show where we were trying to get things back on the rails, and then we went right back off the rails.
Yep, and that was an unforeseen season finale. For those that did listen throughout season one, my wife and I, we had a daughter, and she is now 10 months old. So, of course, throughout that hiatus, it was just kind of hard with a newborn to have my job of what at the time was meteorology, working in a local news station. But I have since left that job, so that's freed up a little bit of time to really focus on the podcast, to really focus on being the best father I can be, and not to mention focus on Winnipeg sports as a whole. And I'm
Oh,
really glad.
and also not having to go to bed at 6:30. So that
Yeah,
all
and yeah,
too.
it is. It would be my bedtime if I was still working on that schedule. But Lauren is in bed now, so there's that. She's still on that bedtime routine, but give it about a year, and she probably won't be anymore. She'll be wanting to stay up. Even the end of this year, Santa Claus is coming. I know I
Mhm.
should probably be asleep, but I want to stay up to see if he comes down the chimney. All that fun stuff. But I want to start off the show with something that a lot of Jets fans in particular are probably in the Facebook group Jetstream. And I got to pull up the particular post, but it was a really good public service announcement from one of the admins of the group. And basically, it was about the game last night when the Jets played the Canucks. Dominant performance, by the way, winning 6-1. But there was an instance where, of course, they could have had yet another shutout, which Hellebuck has already done more than his fair share of those this year. But essentially the preface of it was that a lot of comments were almost personal attacks at different players within the Jets organization, whoever you want to place the blame on, whether it be anyone on defense, whether it be your forwards, whether it be your goaltender. And there was some very harsh language that was used. I'd rather not repeat for the purposes of this podcast, but the admin for Jetstream just went out and said, "Hey, I had to delete a lot of these comments because these guys are still human." And we've seen it across all sports, not just hockey, but they may be able to put on superhuman like acts, but at the end of the day, they're still human like you and me. They have feelings, they have emotions, they have social media, so they can see some of these comments. And if you get enough hate from your own city, are you really going to want to play for that organization, for that city anymore? Am I
Well, and
wrong?
especially it's not we were over this too a bunch in season 1 too, where hey, Winnipeg isn't exactly a destination NHLers prefer to go to unless they're thinking in strictly hockey terms. So why give them another reason not to want to go there?
And I mean, honestly, and there's definitely some hometown bias here, but I think maybe not hometown, but you get my drift.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I was
like,
gonna say we're a little far away for that.
yeah, but I think that a lot of the other Jets fans that I have interacted with, whether they're in Winnipeg, whether they're anywhere else, they've all been very level-headed. They've been some great fans, and I could not picture them saying some of the things that may have been deleted on that particular Facebook fan page. But again, like we're not certain fan bases that may have berated another fairly recently. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just say it was a playoff game in the NFL, and a guy lost his job over heckling another fan. I don't know if you know what I'm alluding to, Joe, but being a Packers fan yourself, yes, I just kind of dimed out the organization. I think you understand what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking
Uh-huh.
and
Everybody's an expert, says the guy on a podcast.
yeah. And jokes aside, there's no room for that in sports. There's just not. But I will get off my soapbox now. That was just kind of something I felt like needed to be said. Um, Now, there's a little bit more in Jets news today, which may seem minor, pun slightly intended with this. Before we kind of dive into the last stretch of games that the Jets have had in the upcoming stretch, I want to talk about a trade, which to some, I mean, these guys are still very young, very little, if any, NHL experience. But there was a trade between the Jets and the Blackhawks that was reported today. TSN's Darren Drager confirmed a trade between the Central Division rivals. Isaac Phillips is coming to Winnipeg, and Dmitry Kuzmin is going to Chicago. Now, Isaac Phillips, he was a former fifth round pick. He is coming to the Jets. He showed a little bit of promise, we'll say. He's definitely got the size too, 6'3", which is something that we need on the blue line. When we have skilled defensemen, but we don't necessarily have the size, aside from Logan Stanley, it's something that's really going to come in handy. And he very well could crack a bottom four defensive pairing in the NHL. He's got 56 games of NHL experience. Now, stat sheet wise, not impressive in 56 games, but he's young, 23 years old, tallied 2 goals, 12 assists, and of course the Jets are looking for some blue liners that are NHL ready. We'll say they do have a pipeline of guys within their system, really, that they have a log jam of blue liners, which we have, of course, offloaded some, but we could use some NHL ready defensemen. And I
Yeah,
have a
especially
feeling,
after you hit the trade deadline, you're gonna need to be able to pull up in case of an emergency. So having an extra guy in your system definitely can't hurt.
yeah. And Dmitry Kuzmin hasn't had really much of a chance in the NHL, of course, but He's got just a goal and 4 points in 21 games for the Moose this season. He's 21, so he's still young too. I think maybe what he needs is a fresh start, and maybe he'll get that in Chicago. So very well could be mutually beneficial between the two teams.
Oh yeah, and he'll have fewer impediments to getting to the NHL in the Chicago system too.
Unfortunately for Chicago, yes, that is the case. They need a little bit of help. They got Bedard, but I mean they need a little bit more than just him.
Uh-huh.
And they're proving that right now. What is it? They've got 30 points in 44 games.
Yeah, I have no trouble being excited about a Chicago team struggling. It's just my birthright, right?
Well, I mean, what Chicago team is good at this point? The Cubs, they showed a little flash, but it was too little too late. The White Sox set history,
Mhm.
and not good history. The Blackhawks are terrible. The Bulls are terrible. The Bears are terrible. What Chicago team is good? I don't even think the Sky. I mean, I'm not really huge on the WNBA, but I don't think the Sky are that good either.
How are the Wolves doing in the AHL? I haven't been watching that closely on that front. For a while, they were Chicago's preferred hockey team, right?
Honestly, though, and maybe I mean I haven't checked on how the Wolves are doing, but maybe you know what? Well, let's actually take a glimpse. Maybe they're going to be okay.
Maybe they're the best team in Chicago right now.
Right, if they have a winning record, let's see here. Team standings. This is what happens when you don't have show notes too. You can just kind of deviate and go wherever you want. Where are they? Western Conference. They are fourth place in the Central Division. They've got 17 wins. They've got 13 losses, 2 overtime losses. So they're pretty mid.
Which for
But they do have
Chicago is
2
good.
games in hand to Milwaukee. So they'll, if they even lose one in overtime, they'll pass Milwaukee.
Yeah. Speaking of which, it's like the one Wisconsin team I won't root for right now.
Well, yeah. And can we not talk about the Moose right now?
No.
I'd prefer not to if that's all right with you.
Yep, we can move on.
Yeah. So talking about the better Winnipeg team, we'll say. As we had mentioned, very dominant performance against Vancouver, 6-1, and Kyle Connor opened the scoring. What else is new? Kyle Connor scores a goal. Kyle Connor scores 2 goals. What else is new?
Kyle Connor scores 3 goals.
Kyle Connor scores 3 goals. All within a very short amount of time. It was really funny because when I was watching the game, I saw the I follow the Jets official Facebook page, and it was funny. They had posted about Kyle Connor's hat trick, and they were like posting this before he scores another one because it was just one right after another. And then Neil
Maybe
Pionk
they shouldn't have. Maybe he would have kept scoring.
Yeah. And Neil Pionk even got in on the party. He tallied the 4th goal, Nino Niederreiter 5th goal, and Mark Scheifele power play goal. Definitely iced it at that point, 6-0. And then this is where there was that public service announcement that I had at the very beginning. They lost the shutout about halfway through the third. It happens. And that was, again, where some of the players had gotten berated. And, just remember, they are human too. Now, looking at some of the other games that they've had in this stretch, they did have the back-to-back Friday and Saturday before they had the 2 days rest. Kings, heartbreaker in overtime, 2-1. But then you come back with a shutout against Colorado, a nice Central Division foe. And, I mean, Colorado doesn't seem to be playing like the Avalanche that we know and hate. I mean, no one spies trying to
Oh
make
no,
it sound
I don't need
mild, but
I don't need much to get I don't need much to go back and hate the Avalanche. Been doing it for 30 years, so what's the difference now?
yeah. So even though they're not playing like they did, it was especially in the second period. Now, granted, it was very we'll just say aesthetically pleasing that the score of the game was 3-0, and the Jets tallied 1 goal in the first, 1 goal in the second, 1 goal in the third. But that second period against the Avalanche was just dominant. The time on attack that the Jets had, not to mention the shots on goal, were 12-5 in just the second period alone. And total shots 29-22. But that just now we're two games to one on the Avalanche this year. And our last one, what is today, the 15th? Yeah. So it's a week from today that the season finale, maybe we'll see them in the postseason. Who knows? But we go to Denver next Wednesday, and that's going to be a good one. And it still feels weird talking about playing Utah. I want to say Arizona, but nope, we go to Utah on Monday too. So got a little bit of a Central Division showdown next week. A game in Utah on Monday. We have a game in Colorado on Wednesday, and then come back home to play Utah again that Friday. And sandwiched in between, we do have a finish off this homestand against two Pacific Division teams in Seattle and Calgary. Joe, what are your thoughts on this upcoming stretch?
Well, that Colorado game's going to be rather important. You finish in a tie at the end of the year with Colorado, you might want that tiebreaker.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just having a bunch of home games, it just feels like they've been on the road all season. And it's obviously not been the case, but it just feels like they've been getting the worst end of the schedule more often than you'd like to see. But they're playing through it. They're fighting through it. It's not. They're making it. They're making do with what they got. When that the way everything's laid out. So having a nice
Yeah.
home stretch like this is the time to start making some points.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because the way that the homestand started, I mean, this is a very long homestand, and it's earned because, like you said, they seem like they've been playing on the road a lot, and they have. So you earn a 8-game homestand. Unfortunately, it started off with 2 losses, a heartbreaker against Anaheim, and then that one was in overtime, and then Detroit losing 4-2. But then we started to pick things up a little bit. Nashville, pretty dominant when they're another heartbreaker to another Southern California team. Uh, Kings losing in overtime 2-1. But then another dominant win against Colorado, Vancouver, and we got Seattle and Calgary at home. So, yeah, if we can close out this homestand with 4 straight dubs, that's awesome, and then that gives you the momentum onto the road trip. We have nothing but Central Division games next week: Utah, Colorado, Utah again, and I have a good feeling that we could just further our lead in the Central at that point too. I mean, we've only played one game against Utah, and what do you know? It was another shutout, 3-0 back on November 5th. So this will be our first time going to Utah. So that'll be kind of cool. New barn, new fan base, should be an exciting one.
Yeah, the Utah is not exactly the one I'll stop on very often when I'm flipping through and saying what's on tonight. So it'd be kind of nice to get that atmosphere finally after they've had 3 or 4 months to perfect it now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was like a little different. Like Vegas, they had a fan base like that, which for better or worse, it was an exciting atmosphere. Um, Seattle, that one, like, I don't know if they necessarily got the fan base right away because Vancouver is right there. But I will say, especially after that first year, that really built a pretty good rivalry between the Kraken and the Canucks. And I have you ever watched a game between those two?
No, that's usually past my bedtime.
That's fair. I have watched highlights, but now that my bedtime is not 6:30 p.m., I can actually watch it. And just watching the highlights, it always seemed like an exciting game. So being able to watch when those two teams actually play, it'll be good. I'm pretty excited to check that out. But yeah, so we pretty much hit on all that. We hit on the trade. We hit on the homestand. So why don't we switch gears a little bit and go with a little bit of Bombers news because we had a little bit of heartbreak in the Grey Cup, but it's like Groundhog Day at this point.
Well, at least this time they found a different way of losing, right? Instead of like making me heel over with like 15 seconds to go and going, "Oh, it's over." It was that was a lot more of a slow burn. It's just like they're not gonna do it, and then like two quick turnovers in succession. All of a sudden, we're down multiple scores. It's like, yeah, now I get 10 minutes left of game time to just sit here and ponder my existence and why I'm here. I mean, still
At least
enjoy.
you were warmer this time.
Yes, yes, and BC threw a hell of a Grey Cup too. Of course, it does
Yeah,
help
I
when
bet.
when your planning buddy, the guy that knows what he's doing when he's planning, gets you the hotel literally like next door to the convention center where everything is. So
That's awesome.
made for some nights without even a coat, which is like fantastic for November anywhere, right? I'll take that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I'm kind of jealous because November here was the beginning of November was a little warm, but then it just turned cold like that.
yeah, and we stayed cold until all of a sudden we got a burst of snow in the middle of the day. It's like, oh, it's no longer like too cold to walk your dog, but now it's
Hmm.
snowy. Oh well. But bomber news. They are working. It seems like over the last couple of days, uh, we've had quite a bit of time in between the Grey Cup and when the signings are starting. Of course, free agency starts middle of next month, so teams are trying to get their rosters in order before and know who they're going to be able to chase. Because I do believe there's a week-long period before free agency officially starts where teams can start talking to the other team's free agents. So teams like to have their ducks in a row before that. So the Bombers are starting to trickle out some signings. Went out and got Dylan Mitchell from Edmonton, who really showed some good flashes a couple of seasons ago, and kind of has been an afterthought for the most part. But we know what he can do, and we know plugged into the right offense, it's going to be fun to see. Uh, Patty Neufeld is back. Kyrie Wilson is back. We knew Tony Jones was back already. So starting to answer some questions as to where our defense is going to be. Willie Jefferson and Evan Holm are two big signings over the last couple of days. So starting to round into form as to what this 2025 team is going to be. Of course, it seems like it's going to be the last run for a lot of these players. So fingers crossed that when I'm sitting in the stands in November in Winnipeg, I'll probably be cold, but hopefully I'll be celebrating a victory instead of agonizing over defeat.
Yeah, that would make it worth it. And I think that especially if the Bombers make it again, let's hope that we don't become the Buffalo Bills and lose four in a row. Um, but B, if they make it, I think that we're going to have to do a little bit of coverage, like live for that. So,
Well, I know I'll be there. This year
yeah,
I took the time just to party, but we'll see about next year as far as that goes. But
we're going to have to actually put in a little bit of work if they make it. And you know what? It's I don't know if I want to call it work because what is the old saying? If you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
that is the
So,
truth, isn't it?
hmm and yeah, I mean, I saw it too. Like, what would be awesome is if the later this season, the Jets keep on with the pace that they've had and actually make it past the first round. which has been a difficult task as of late. But make it past the first round and scratch and claw their way to a final. Maybe we can do a little bit of coverage for that too. But later in next or this November, wow, feels weird to say that. Um, we could maybe be covering the Bombers. So lots to look forward to. And even though, yeah, that window is really closing for the Bombers, it's still open for likely this year, and then probably going to have to go into a full scale rebuild.
Well, yeah, there's going to be changes. Just
Right.
Father Time. Wait, Father Time is never defeated. So
Unfortunately, the
these things
case.
will change.
Unless you're Tom Cruise.
Well, I don't think that's completely natural, to be fair.
Have you seen some of the stunts that he like? Of course, like he does his own stunts, and I watched like a video of it, and like some of the things that he did. I forget what movie it was, but he was like jumping in between two buildings, and ended up like breaking his ankle, and still filmed. It's like this dude should be a professional wrestler for the things that they do.
Oh,
Like
yep. He must have the
they
pain
do their
tolerance,
own
that's for
stunts.
sure.
Yeah, they do their own stunts. They like was I think the Hell in the Cell with Undertaker and Mankind. Obviously, what happened to Mankind getting thrown off the cell, but a small detail that I recently learned, like within the last like 2 years, and that match was what back in the '90s.
Uh-huh.
Um, Apparently, when the cell like broke through and they both fell into the ring, that was not planned, and Undertaker like sprained his ankle, and um, maybe to get a little gruesome, so just I'll put the disclaimer out for that. Here it goes. There was like a tooth that came through Mankind's lip, and or like it came out this way, I guess I should say. And so it kind of looked like a booger. And in the middle of the match, Undertaker had mentioned that to McFoley or Mankind or whatever, and he tried to wipe it. No, it was a tooth.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's taking one for the team right there.
and they put on quite a show.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that covers it for Jets news and Bombers news, unless there was something else you had. But
Yep. I do have one more point of Bomber
yeah,
news, although it's a former Bomber in this case, and a former Green Bay Packer quarterback coach. It sounds like Tom Clements is retiring. He is probably the only person that's been able to have their coaching hands on Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love at any given time. So just for that, that's a fantastic career. And let's
yeah,
and we haven't even started to mention the two Grey Cups he won in the CFL, the MOP in the CFL, uh, the fact that part of that time was in Winnipeg. There's a reason I wear his name and number on my Bomber jersey. So good for him for it, making it to the end of the road, and hopefully he's got plenty more years left to enjoy retirement.
yeah. And speaking of enjoying retirement, sure, this is way old news, but um, former Jets coach Rick Bowness, obviously, his wife had some health issues, and he'd been around for God only knows how long in the NHL, and we weren't really able to wish him well in his retirement at the end of our last season on Winnipeg Terminal. So just wanted to wish Bones a very happy retirement as well, and needs to enjoy it because he's put in so much work, not just for the Jets organization, but hockey as a whole.
Yep, absolutely. And he did leave the table. He did leave the cupboard pretty full in Winnipeg too this time around.
Oh, for sure. And um, we had the trial run of Scott Arniel, and now we're getting the actual paid subscription, if you will. And he's looking like he's doing a pretty great job with what Bones left him.
Yep,
And
I'll renew that subscription. Thank you.
yeah, me too. And what was kind of funny too was it looked like in the off season, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but did it not look like in the off season that the Jets almost downgraded, like with some of the moves that they made, who they let walk, who they signed?
Well, if you think about it, though, they did make the trade for Monahan last year to get the power play moving.
Mhm.
Clearly, the power play was functional this year from the get go, and even better than functional at a lot of times. And then Tyler Toffoli really never quite was an impact player. He was still quality, but not quite the impact you're looking for from a deadline acquisition. So coming back to what was working last year and making changes on the coaching staff to get a new look on things ended up being the better move instead of trying to throw good money after bad.
Right. And I do agree. And some of the signings that they had in the offseason too, like they might not have gotten the big splash. They didn't sign Stamkos. But you know what? Everyone on that team is pulling their weight, and it's really nice when you see the big guns like Kyle Connor, getting a hat trick yesterday. Connor Hellebuck playing like Connor Hellebuck. You know, you get that play from your big guns, and your depth players show up and show out the way that they have done. There's nowhere to go but up from here. Like I mean, I guess maybe that's the wrong choice of words because we're essentially at the top. The only team above us in the standings, if I remember correctly, let me just double check. In the league, that is, I should say, is former Jet Pierre-Luc Dubois and his squad that features a supporting cast of none other than the great eight, Alexander Ovechkin,
Yeah,
which Russian machine never breaks. What was it, like 5 weeks in between breaking his leg and coming back
yeah,
playing?
it was pretty. It was pretty fast. And for those that haven't seen this commercial yet, at some point, run yourself over to YouTube, pop in ESPN Sports Center Ovechkin, and watch the Russian spy commercial.
I know exactly the one you're talking about too.
Ah, yep.
That one was great. And then another Sports Center commercial. The one that I liked was with Albert Pujols, the machine. You know the one I'm talking about.
Mhm.
That one was another one that I liked. They used to have some really good commercials for Sports Center.
Yeah, I wouldn't know anymore because I don't think I've had linear ESPN on my TV except for certain times for a long time now.
Yeah,
We were out front of the cord cutting revolution.
yeah. Well, just to land this plane a little bit, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite memory of the first year of your son's life? If you could pick one from the whole first year, whether it's you just can't pick the day he was born.
Well, of course, no. Trying to think because we spent a lot of time. We were in the Madison, Wisconsin area at that time and didn't have a lot of family around.
Mhm.
Uh, Honestly, though, I think it must be the first Christmas that we took him up to see Grandma. So,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, and Easter too. Easter, he was a little bit more able to know something was happening, and
sure.
we had him dressed very well for the occasion. You could see
Yeah,
you go back and look at the pictures, you could see the personality starting to come out at that point. Christmas was probably a little too soon for much more than he's trying to figure out what this is all about. Now Easter, he's like, "Ooh, people are around. I like people. Let's have fun."
mhm. That's kinda how Lauren is too, like, she's almost a year old now, and, yeah, she's now, like when we're around people that like she doesn't see very often, like friends that we might not have seen in months or whatever have you, she's a little timid. And then once mom and dad, of course, um, but she'll see grandma and grandpa and get all excited. And when she sees dogs, oh my goodness, does she go nuts? She just loves dogs like you wouldn't believe. So maybe I could use that as ammo to get my wife to get us a dog because I've been the one that's been asking for a dog and she's refusing.
In our family, it was the other way around, so we have a dog.
Ah, yeah, we don't have one, so you know the old saying, "Happy wife, happy life," right?
That's why we have a dog,
Exactly.
and that's why I'm up at 5:30 every morning walking the dog.
Yeah, I'm so glad I don't gotta wake up that early anymore. Well, I guess I wake up at 5:45 because my wife's a teacher, but
Yeah,
um,
but that
you
you're
know, that's
sleeping in by like 3 hours now, aren't you?
exactly. So I'm not gonna complain. Not anymore. All right. Well, I think that'll do it. We're landing this plane. We are now clear for landing at the Winnipeg Terminal. For the dub, go Jets go. It's been a while, so give me a little bit of grace on that. I didn't really do our sign off very well, but we'll try this again. We are now clear for landing. For the dub, go Jets go.